Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
Podcast for parents and families everywhere.
whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students. You want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that allows you to better understand the world. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach.
And I'm Anika Madden, and I'm a parent. It is Thursday, October 24th, and welcome to episode number 91. Why the buzz about the Coalition for College Application? In this week's news, welcome to the Wild West. The competition for applicants just intensified. And we're in chapter 91 of 171 answers, and we're explaining why there is so much buzz about the Coalition for College Application. And this week's question is from a mom of a charter school student who attends a school where they don't have traditional AP and IB courses. And she wants to know if and how admissions officers will interpret the classes as being equivalent to AP and IB. And Mark continues his interview with Peter Van Buskirk in understanding how colleges act as businesses in ways that are not in your best interest. Part 2.
Friends, whoever sent us that survey that said, hey, where are the timestamps for your college spotlights? I'm trying to look up University of Pennsylvania and I can't find it. Thank you so much, because you gave us another good idea. We're trying to go back and add timestamps to our show notes so you can find those college spotlights. So once again, you guys are helping us improve. If you haven't done our survey yet, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com. Under the About Us section, you'll see a link that will say survey. For my tip this week, friends, admissions tips, it is application season. This is a basic tip, but it's an important one. Watch those deadlines. Anika, my heart was broken this week when one of the students I'm working with in Florida reached out and she said, Mark, I missed the deadline for the Morehead Scholarship. I didn't realize it's October 1st for out-of-state students, not October 15th. You don't want to look up and see what Morehead is worth. I mean, it's the whole kit and caboodle. Wow. I mean, of course, she's really strong, so she'll be competitive other places, but very, very painful. And a lot of times people are fixated on, they're thinking, well, ED, EA, November 1st. I'm not applying ED or I'm not applying EA. Watch for the priority deadlines as well, because priority deadlines are students that will be prioritized for scholarship money. All those deadlines are coming up now. Are they on your radar, Anika?
Yes, they are. And let me tell you, Naya caught one because she realized that one of her schools, even though they had their early application deadline at a certain time, they wanted their scores at an earlier time, which was interesting. So thank God she caught it. But yeah, those deadlines are also real.
Yeah, you have to be careful with the scores, because there are schools, let's say it's a school's got a November 1st, for example, deadline for early action program. There are schools that will take test scores before that, and then there's schools that will take test scores slightly after that. You know what I mean? And there's not always consistency. So you got to really read the policy on each school's website. So that's the tip. And for admissions vocabulary or vernacular, the term this week is HSI. Have you ever heard of that one, Anika?
I was going to say something silly, but no.
What were you going to say?
No,
just throw it out there. What popped in your mind?
Nope. Keep rolling.
Now, I'm going to be curious the whole rest of the podcast.
Sorry.
I don't like that.
HSI. What is it, Mark?
Yeah, okay. That means don't push me, because I'm not coughing it up. I know, Anika. HSI stands for Hispanic Serving Institution. Hispanic Serving Institution. And they are growing like crazy. It's actually an official Department of Education term. And it refers to organizations that have undergraduate full-time enrollment of at least 25% Hispanic. And you become eligible for some significant government grants. So it's something that a lot of schools are trying to get that official designation. And over the last 25 years, Anika, they're up 4 times compared to what they were before, because of the growth of, the Latinx community. Wow. So we're now looking at about 500 colleges in the country that, last I checked, it was 492. And that was like 2018. So probably 500 now at the rate it's growing. And some of the schools that would be, HSIs would be bunch of the Cal State schools in, California,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the CUNY schools like CUNY Hunter, Florida International, and then quite a few of the UC schools, Riverside, Santa Cruz, Merced, Santa Barbara, growing, growing, growing. So HSI is our term of the day.
Are you finding that just in are HBCUs doing that too? Like, is everybody doing that? That's so interesting.
Doing what?
Doing the HSI. I don't know if you
What do
call
you
it a
mean doing the
program.
HSI?
I was going to. That's why I paused.
And first
I'm
of
like,
all,
is
you
it
need
a
to tell
program?
people what HBCUs are, Nika. Not everybody knows that.
Well, historically black colleges and universities.
Correct. Right.
And so, are they too doing HSIs?
Meaning, what do you mean they too doing HSIs?
Okay, so you're saying they have this distinction of being
Correct.
an HSI institution. So do HBCUs have that distinction? I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
You're an HBCU or an HSI or a PWI or just or majority rule, There's also some government funding available for HBCUs as well. I've never heard of an HBCU also being HSI. Like it's usually, you're an HBCU or you're a PWI, which, by the way, I was going to throw that out for another vocab of the day, but I guess I blew that out in this predominantly white institution, PWI. So we got it's alphabet soup here this week, Yanika.
Mm-hmm.
And for our college spotlight, it will be MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Met with them. Fantastic meeting with them 3 days ago. So we'll talk about that. Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right, Mark, this week's article, breaking news, like we said before, right? It's Welcome to the Wild West. The competition for college applicants just intensified. And this is written by Mr. Eric Hoover. Very recently, he wrote it up in the Chronicle of Higher Education. And so admissions officers and college counselors that attended this National Association for College Admissions Counseling, their 75th annual conference, they just voted to delete 3 major portions of their ethics code. And so the 3 big segments are that first, colleges were barred from offering incentives to students for applying to an early decision. They were doing things like offering special housing and better financial aid packages. They were also restricted from recruiting students.
Nika, not that they were doing that. They were barred from doing that.
Right. That's what I mean. Sorry. I thought that's what I said. So these are the things that they were barred. So all 3 of these things they used to not be able to do,
Correct.
And now they can do it. So that was the first thing. So the second thing is that they couldn't recruit students once they submitted a deposit to another school.
Yep.
And the third big thing was that they couldn't solicit transfer applications from a previous applicant unless the student inquired about transferring. So now, like you said, all those things are now gone, based on this big vote that happened I've heard you say this, the NACAC Association Conference. So how about this hilarious quote in the article? And I guess hence the title of the article is someone tweeted, "Welcome to the Wild West," because now, Mark, colleges, what in the world? Did the admissions board just throw their hands up in the air and just say, forget it, we're about to go all in? So, Mark, just tell us what's jumping off here. How about that?
Yeah, this is, we don't use the term break. We're not CNN and MSNBC with breaking news every 10 seconds.
We're better. We're better.
Yeah. Let's break this. We got breaking news 3 straight weeks. We got breaking news next week too. We'll be talking about that with the ACT. But this is really major. I think this week's breaking news and next week's breaking news, Anika, I really think they're the biggest. In fact, I would say confidently, these are the biggest, most significant instances of breaking news since we started our podcast. If you go back and you look what our other breaking news was, well, obviously Varsity Blues, that was definitely a big deal. Environmental Context Dashboard, which became Landscape, that was a big deal. Chicago going test optional, and initial ruling, for Harvard on affirmative action case. Those are the only other times we've really had breaking news in 90 some episodes. This is a big deal. And so the history, the genesis of this has to do with the Department of Justice. And so 2 years ago, the Department of Justice opened an investigation. We probably should have had an in the news discussion when that happened, Anika, talking about it. But they pretty much were challenging college admissions practices under antitrust violations. And what they're saying is that the current practices are not fair to the consumer because they're not allowing the consumer to get the best financial aid offer. And so there was a fear that they were going to just shut down NACAC and take over. And NACAC has been the governing body, National Association for College Admission Counselors. People think of NACAC conferences and NACAC fairs, but they create the policies and principles of good practice that serve as the governing legislation for how admissions does admissions, what's fair and what's not fair. And so it was out of fear because they're very serious the way it's been worded. Department of Justice, like they're not playing games. They don't think the current way admissions is operating is in the best interest of the consumer, and it's not allowing them to price shop the way that they feel they should. And by the way, there's some history for this. So if you go back to like 1990, the Ivies and another group of schools that were known as the overlap group. So it's the Ivies and some schools that commonly overlapped with Ivy schools in the application process, such as MIT. They had said, this is crazy. You're offering this price. We're offering this price. This is like prices are all over the place and it's really, really hard for the consumer. So let's agree that we are going to charge our applicants with the same income and the same assets, the exact same amount, so that people can actually pick the school just off the school that they like, not because you gave them $7,000 more than I gave them, you gave them $2,500 more than I gave them. And what happened was Department of Justice came in then at the same time, similar to this, and said, no, antitrust violation. And some people spoke out of MIT in particular, they were vociferous, and they said, this is going to lead to insanity when it comes to aid offers being all over the place. But it is what it is. So that's the history. And so they were flexing their muscles again. And NACAC did not want to do this. Not at all. But they were really scared, like they were not going to have a choice. So they better act in good faith or they may shut us down and just take over. And so did you see what the vote was, Anika, when they voted?
I don't remember that.
211.
Oh, wait, I do. To three, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, that was crazy.
211 to 3. It's interesting. It's my job to go to NACAC every year. And it's a long story. I ended up not going this year. I should have been there for that. I'm going to be at the College Board Conference in Washington, D.C. this year. And so it came down to a choice between the two. And I do SACAC every year. But I should have been there for this, and I wasn't. But this is going to absolutely rock college admissions. And it's effective immediately, by the way. And so do you have thoughts on how things are going to change?
Well, first of all, I knew it was kind of fierce, but I didn't know it was like that, honestly. I mean, the way they were making it sound like going after kids after they've already made deposits, like, good gracious, that's pretty intense. But before I get away from my thought, Mark, you're saying that you should have been there. So are you saying that you would have been number 4 in that vote?
Hey, I'm not on the board. The conference has 7. It's huge, 7,000 attendees. I mean, this thing is, every magical workshop.
Not all.
Yeah. I'm not a board member. Okay. I'm not a board member.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
But still,
no, I'm not a big gun like that. So, but I think you know me well enough to know I'm not a fan of this ruling. I'm not a fan of this ruling. And some people may say, well, wait a minute. Doesn't it mean that some kids are going to get better financial aid offers? Yes, it does. But why do you think I'm not a fan of this ruling, Anika?
To me, it just seems wild. Just like the title of this article. It just seems off the charts. Like, I don't know. I just can't imagine just hunting down. It sounds like a hunt. Like you're hunting down these kids. And why that kid? Like, why are you putting forth that extra effort for those kids particularly? Like there are thousands of kids out here trying to get into your school. So why just that kid? And why so intensely?
Well, I mean, I understand that piece of it just selfishly. People want students that they feel will help them. Selfishly, you get attached to kids and you feel this kid can help your institution. But the reasons why I don't like this, Anika, and I feel pretty strongly about it, I listed several. First of all, this is so important. I think we need to say the 3 changes again, just in case someone's driving, their dog's barking, their TV's loud, husband's yelling at the wife, the kid's going off about the homework. Like, let's just say those 3 changes one more time. So everybody has them like emblazoned on their forehead, and then I'll tell you why I don't like it.
Okay, so you want me to read through them again?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, just the 3 big changes. Yeah.
Okay, so the first big change is that colleges will now be able to offer incentives to kids who apply under early decision. They'll be able to give them things such as special housing and better financial aid packages. The second one is that they will be able to recruit students once they make a deposit at another school. They can still go after that kid. And the third one is that colleges will be able to solicit transfer applicants from kids who tried to apply to them before, even though the kid hasn't inquired about transferring. So they're like going back to kids saying, hey, why don't you transfer over here?
Exactly. Yeah. So in the past, you know, obviously the opposite was true, right? You could have early decision, but you couldn't have an extra incentive like 5, 10 extra grand if you apply ED, or you'll get to stay in this super suite, and all these, you can imagine where this could go in terms of benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, May 1st has traditionally been National Candidate Reply Day. And so you were expected to respect the fact that when a contract is signed and a deposit is made, that you back off. All right, it's a violation. And then imagine, once a student is already enrolled and they're a freshman and you didn't get that kid from last year, and you can still start recruiting them and whatever, throwing money at them or whatever.
But
So,
wait,
yes.
Mark, hold on. Because I'm a little confused about that.
Okay.
So I applied to school A.
Let's use Janaea, because that's real.
Okay, Janaea applies to school. Let's just say she applies to school A. I'll still say school A. But she makes her deposit at school B. How does school A even know she made her deposit at school B?
You remember from last week, Nika, we talked about the clearinghouse. The clearinghouse allows you to get
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, allows you to get data on where people enroll. Also, there are other things we didn't talk about that much, but sometimes schools will do just email surveys to anybody in their applicant pool who doesn't enroll to find out where they went. And then sometimes when there's a relationship between an admissions counselor and a student, you know what I mean? It's kind of natural.
Like yeah.
Janaea met somebody at a fair and they had some good conversation. And then, hey, Janaea, saw you weren't here. Where'd you end up? Like, so there can be informal ways and there can be formal ways.
Okay.
So I'm not trying to say every single time they will always know, but a lot of times they're going to be able to find out. Okay. So anyway, was that your question or was that just part one of your question?
Yeah, that was perfect. That was it.
Okay. Yeah. So the reality, I'm just going to throw this out there just to try to concretize this. Let's say Janaea was interested in the University of Michigan. Let's say the University of Michigan was interested in her and she had applied, but she didn't enroll. And she goes somewhere else, whatever, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I'm just making schools up, right? And then Michigan could go after her when she's a student at Chapel Hill. And when she's enrolled there, she's in class just loving life, all involved in sorority life and having fun with her roommate and everything. And then they start wooing her. And so that's the third thing, right? And so here's what I don't like about it. One, we've talked about this before. There's one pot of money out there. There's need-based and there's merit-based, right? And while there's definitely a place for merit-based, I understand it. I don't like the precipitous rate at which money is completely shifted from not completely, but the rate at which money is shifted from need-based to merit-based. And this is just going to accelerate that because now people are just going to be throwing more and more money at the top kids. And it's going to decrease the need-based availability of money that's out there. And that money right now is completely inadequate, especially with states pulling back in terms of what they're able to offer. So I see it leading to more of a skew between the haves and the have-nots, which if you're passionate at all about access and equity, that's something that's troubling. So that's one thing. Secondly, this is going to bankroll some schools. Like, and you can remember a while ago, we talked about how schools were closing and rural schools were closing and liberal arts schools in the middle of nowhere. I don't think, honestly, we've emphasized that as much as we should. A lot of higher ed is really in trouble right now. Right. And this is really going to hurt struggling schools because they're not going to be able to have the resources to compete. And the schools that are struggling already usually don't have the prestige, and if someone comes after them with something, they're, or they don't have the finances or the prestige. And it's just going to really, really hurt them.
Wow.
It's also going to lead to schools probably increasing their deposits. There's already colleges talking about that, right? So when I even look at the private school that my kids went to in Atlanta, and I didn't know I was going to go here today, but we're getting off topic. And so I was talking to their admissions folks and I was saying, why is it that if somebody gets an acceptance from you, like immediately with 10 days, they need to put $2,000 down and they lose their spot? I said, if you're trying to be a little more sensitive to under-resourced kids and access, $2,000 out of the blue, you got 2 or 3 kids. If you weren't expecting that, I know it's a private school, but still that could be $6,000. And so I asked them that question. You know what they told me? They said, well, Mark, it used to be $400, but people were just blowing it off, getting in somewhere else and leaving. And we're counting on that for our numbers, and then we got to replace them like late into July. And so that's what I see is going to happen right now. Right now deposits tend to be 500 or less. And schools are going to start beefing up their deposits as insurance so that if you break it, you're going to at least lose that $2,000 that you had to put down. So that's going to happen. Then another thing I don't like is that the insanity is not going to stop. I'm working with this Midwest family, Anika, and I did a session with them today. And I got on and, great conversation, fantastic kid. And then after talking with the daughter for a while, the mom came on and I said, how's it going? And then she said, I just want this process to be over. That sounds like something you would have said, right? Well, guess what? It's not going to be over now. There's not going to be closure because May 1st is not a time anybody has to back off. And even in your freshman year, you can still keep getting, recruited and courted. So I don't like that. Right now, one thing I love about education, and when I came into education, I'd done 6 years of outside business to business sales coming from that world. And one thing I loved about education was how collegial it is. You could visit a competitor and they'll show you around and share some of their practices and you share their practices. When I first saw that, I'm coming from business world, I was like, what in the world? Why would you invite your competitors in and share all these things? But I like the collegiality, and I think this is going to create more tension. It's going to be more bad blood, because people are not going to like people that they try to have some type of a civil relationship with stealing their kids away when they were counting on them to meet their numbers. So I don't think that's going to be good. And another thing is it's just going to lead to even more insanity around early decision.
Right.
But remember, early decision benefits the affluent because the people usually that apply ED, well, it benefits the extremes, to be really honest. Really under-resourced kids who are gifted and talented, they benefit by ED because they can get a great financial aid package at a school that may not admit them if they didn't apply early. But then really, wealthy families who don't really, need to compare financial aid packages, they can afford to just stroke the check. It benefits them as well. And so this is going to lead to more ED insanity because schools are going to be beefing up their incentives with ED. So I'm not a fan.
Yeah, and I get all of that. And so, again, I'm back to this big takeaway for us as families. So to combat that, I see us encouraging our kids to go where you really want to be. And so if Janaea enrolls in school A, you go to school A because you want to be there. And if school B comes back and tries to give you $1 million, you don't accept that $1 million because you don't want to be there. Or you want to be at a school A for certain reasons, and you should stick to that. Does that make, I don't know.
So that sounds good in a real world, but you've ever heard the saying, everybody's got their price? Somebody comes with you with enough. Somebody comes with enough of an incentive and people are going to make some changes. And I just don't think that that's good for overall for the industry. I just don't. I'm totally not a fan. And there are a couple quotes in this article, Anika. One of them, you have to look at this process from the standpoint of a 17-year-old. Lewis Hirsch, former director of admissions at the University of Delaware. He says, a 17-year-old, he said, our focus should be on how to make this process less stressful and more meaningful for students who should not have colleges badgering them after they've decided which college they're going to. This document was created to protect people who are vulnerable, and that's what the Department of Justice doesn't understand. So I don't like it. I don't
like it either, by the way.
And some people feel a little different than me. Though I've read some articles from some people that I respect, and they say that, you know what? Hey, some people are going to get some extra money out of this because of the incentives. But what I don't like about it is it's going to be a very small percentage of people that are going to get that, and I don't think it helps them. I'm looking at how it helps the industry as a whole, and rather than, for the most gifted and talented kid, this could be financially beneficial. I don't disagree with that. But I think that something that helps a small number of people but hurts this industry at large, to me, it's not worth it.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, Anika, we are in the 91st chapter, and we only have 2 more chapters on our Getting In segment before we transition to Moolah Money Talk. But remember, this is only one fifth now that we're doing college spotlights, 1/5 of our podcast. So if you don't like the chapter, if the conversation is starting out a little dry, that's why podcast buttons have a little skip ahead, 30-second, 10-minute. Keep it moving. Now, I say that because, we get all these surveys, and some people love when we talk about money, and some people don't love when we talk about money. And we're going to have a fair amount of money talk coming up. But, Anika, you've read this chapter about the coalition. Tell me your thoughts.
Well, let's see. Let's start with the full name of it. Let's start with the Coalition for Access and Affordability. And I know
I got to stop you for 1 second, Anika. That was the original name. And then they had some challenges in the rollout. So they've rebranded it now, the Coalition for College Access and Affordability. But they just called it they just called the Coalition for College as a shorter name. It's still really the Coalition for College Access and Affordability. But so anyway, just a slight tweak. But go ahead.
Okay, slight tweak, and that they're really focused on providing quality education for everyone. And it's all about, getting to those under-resourced and lower income students. And it sounds like they're doing things like, they're making fee waivers easier to obtain through the application. They've made their main essay shorter. And one thing I have a question about, Mark, and I know you probably want to give some commentary before you answer this, but the tool that they have where kids can go in and say, what they call it, the locker, where the kids can save things like their award essay, their awards and essays and class projects and things like that, beginning in the 9th grade. So before you jump in, I'm just going to pose my question. I'm going to let you do your commentary, but I want you to come back to it. So I'm curious about the marketing for this because they're basically in competition with the Common App, right? Which is basically all my school talks about. Like they haven't mentioned this to us, frankly.
No.
So I'm curious about the marketing efforts when they're trying to capture these kids so early on in 9th grade, because we don't hear about the Common App till darn near senior year. So what is this group doing so differently where they're, going after those kids in 9th grade just based on that tool that they have?
All right, I'm going to answer that. But before I do, let me give just a little bit of background. So this happened, Anika, at the time when I was producing my 10-hour college admissions video series in 2014, Game Changer. The thing was almost ready to come out, and then there were massive amounts of problems with the Common App because the Common App had released a new version. It was called CA4, was for short, or Common App 4, meaning the 4th version. And there were a lot of technological issues, like the Common App has to go live August 1st, and the site was crashing. There were all kinds of problems. And a lot of higher ed said, wait a minute, we're allowing this one app to almost be like a monopoly. And if there are problems with it, we're toast. And so a lot of people said, this just is not right. So a number of people, Stanford being one of the leading ones, got to get, and they were real proponents. So we need to have a competitor that does some things different and some things even better. And, for a long time, higher ed has been skewing toward, for lots and lots and lots of reasons, low income kids have been left out of the process. We've talked about this a lot. It has a lot to do with states not giving the appropriations they used to do, Pell Grant not keeping up with the cost of inflation, schools giving more merit aid, which is highly correlated to education of parents and the focus on rankings and test scores. So the bottom line is lower income kids are being shut out of this process for, the skew and who is actually attending schools, especially highly selective privates and flagships, has been happening for a long time. So there are a lot of people in higher ed that said something has to be done about it. So why can't we have an alternative application that really tries to do something about the inequities currently in our education system? So that's a little bit about the genesis, right? But one of the things that they did that was kind of smart from a marketing standpoint is they said, we're only going to let organizations be a part of the coalition that are very, very generous in their financial aid. So that's one reason why you're not hearing about it at your school. Sorry, Nika. You guys aren't the most generous. I'm sorry. I'm just keeping it real. You weren't invited in the club.
Right.
No, seriously. So they did a couple of things. If you were going to be part of the coalition, you needed to meet the full demonstrated financial need of applicants. And you need to have a track record of proving that you are recruiting and enrolling under-resourced students and providing support and graduating them at a high rate.
And what is the indicator of that? Like, that's so
Well, for one, graduation rates.
broad.
Like,
Okay.
they wanted to see 65%. You need to be graduating. I can't remember if it was 60 or 65%, but it's a pretty high graduation rate. That's much higher than the national average, believe it or not. And so what it ended up being is a group of schools initially. And, you couldn't just go join the coalition. You had to be invited. And if you look at the coalition members, they're highly selective schools. They're either flagship institutions in their state, usually, or they're highly selective privates. Now, that's loosened up a little bit now because we're into, our fourth or fifth year of the coalition now. But that was the original group. And back to what you said, they provided this tool called the Locker. And the idea with the Locker is that kids can save things like awards, essays, class projects, videos, art in this online storage beginning in the 9th grade. And the idea is that if they built up all the things that they'd saved, then it would allow low-income kids or modest-income kids to be able to present themselves to colleges in a way where they would look better because they've sort of been building up this portfolio. By the way, that has backfired because what makes you think a low-income kid is going to do that better than a well-resourced kid?
Right.
Right. So if anything, the well-resourced kids are the ones that have been doing that more than the low-income kids. I just have to throw that in there. But so that was, I don't know. Did I answer your question? You had a question about the Locker. I don't know if I answered it or not.
Well, no, you didn't yet. But the question is, okay, so let's take the common application. Our counselor has come at us with the common application around senior year. So with this coalition college application, with that Locker being a tool to use, are they soliciting, like, how are they reaching those kids so early on where traditionally you don't even start talking about these applications until closer to your junior or senior year is what I'm asking.
Well, first of all, most of the schools that are on the coalition are also on the common application. Most counselors do not like the coalition because it's double the work for the counselor to have to, work with a completely different system. So most counselors are not encouraging the coalition, even that I respect some of the goals and the intentions behind it, but it's a pain when I have to deal with, that whole system as well as in addition to the common app. Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. And also, very few colleges are coalition only. So it's easier for the student to do the Common App and bang out all their schools on the Common App, or almost all their schools, than have to do the coalition for these one-offs. But I do respect the goal behind it, the intention behind it. And I will say this, the coalition has definitely made the Common Apps up its game. When I was at Stanford this summer, Nika, they're big proponents of the coalition. I asked them a lot of tough questions because University of Virginia's dropped the coalition. Dartmouth's dropped the coalition. Like, the honeymoon for the coalition ended. First, the coalition, there was all this buzz and excitement and enthusiasm. Well, first of all, remember I talked about the technology problems that the Common App had? The coalition had serious technology problems. It was not user-friendly. There were all kinds of glitches. I put something in this chapter. Do you remember I commented on the chapter? Let me see if I can find it and read it. Oh, here we go. I said this: if the coalition is going to make further inroads, it is going to have to improve its communication and its user friendliness. According to a 2016 Inside Higher Ed survey, this is after the first year, only 8% of admission directors strongly agree that the coalition has done a good job of explaining its process to colleges and their applicants, compared to 68% who disagree or strongly disagree. So their rollout was very sloppy as well. Their communication was not consistent. It wasn't very user-friendly. Now, I will give them credit in this way. They've made a lot of improvements since then. But one of the things that the Common App also did is it looked at the areas that the coalition was trying to address, like access and equity and things targeted toward low-income kids. And the Common App, very responsive to its members, the Common App made a lot of adjustments. So that's the other thing. A lot of people said, okay, I know you did this to help access and help lower-income kids, but the Common App is up their game. And so there are some counselors that feel like, do we really need you now? Because even the areas of weakness the Common App had, they've addressed since you've come out. But I will say this, they're up to 150 schools right now, so they have grown. Okay? But when I talk to schools that take the Common App and the coalition, Anika, they're not getting that many coalition apps. And some, if you look at the movement to me recently has been away from the coalition, not toward the coalition. Some of the schools, like, for example, University of Florida, they were coalition only. They're not anymore. Dartmouth dropped them. Virginia dropped. There's a lot of schools that are questioning it. There's some debate still. Where are they going to be 5 years from now? I think they're so strong that they're not going to be obsolete. 150 schools is pretty significant. They are still growing as well, because one of the things they've been able to do is get some of those big flagship schools. When you get those big flagship schools, you're getting, like, you know what I mean? 50, 60, 70, 80,000 applications maybe. So their application numbers are up. But I can tell you, and I think I might have shared this on the podcast once before, I was at a meeting with the University of Virginia it was around maybe May of last year, when they announced that they would be dropping the coalition next year. And there was 40 of us there. The counselor stood up and gave us standing ovation.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
Because it's just hard for us to have to deal with two completely different systems.
So wait, Mark, should we have entitled this topic or this title the unbuzz about the coalition?
Well, there's some buzz and there's some unbuzz. So in fairness to them, like, all that backlash about how poor their communication was and the technical glitches, they've done a really, everybody I've talked to, every college I've said, oh my goodness, it's so much better. But you know this, Anika, anytime you roll out a major system, you're gonna have some technical stuff, you know? You just are. But it's real when it's an applicant and it impacts them and it impacts their application. That's real on the front lines of the battle.
Yeah.
So that's why, I remember this when I was in sales one time. This is a long time ago now. I'm going back to, like, my goodness, 24 years ago. And so I remember this accountant. I was working for a company called Paychecks, that does payroll services. And I used to get all our business from the accountants. We'd meet with accountants and they'd send us business to the clients. And I remember going to my main accountant in Newtown Square, Pennsylvania. And I was like, man, you're going to love this new product. Went on and on and on about it, And I was talking, he's going to say, yeah, Mark, I'll set you up with all my clients. And he said, you know what he said to me? He's like, every time there's a new product, there's a whole lot of kinks that have to be worked out. Come back to me in 2 years and talk to me about it. I never forgot that.
Well, I think that neatly applies.
All right. I'm sure this will come up again, because with the 150 schools, and they're still improving. They're still listening to, their members, and 150 schools is not insignificant. And so it's not the 900, the coalition, the Common App's up to 900, but they're still a player. They are a player.
All right.
They're just a player that is on the counseling side I hate. Now, don't get me wrong. If there was no Common App and the coalition had 900 schools and the Common App had 150, I'd hate the Common App. It's just easier for me if I can work with an app as a counselor that maybe all my students can be on, except for, I'm probably being selfish and thinking of what's easier for me, as well as probably being too harsh on the Coalition for College Access. The goal of helping under-resourced kids apply to college without undue financial barriers is laudatory. But the Coalition for College Access is also a player They're in 34 states plus Washington, D.C. And there are 17 colleges, really universities, many of them large in-demand universities, that do not use the Common App and only use the Coalition. Included in that list are universities like Clemson, James Madison, Rutgers, Texas A&M, the University of Texas at Austin, the University of Maryland, the University of Georgia, the University of Illinois, the University of Washington, and Virginia Tech. In fact, Virginia Tech doesn't take the Common App, and they over-enrolled by almost 1,000 students last year. So the Coalition more than got the job done. You say, Mark, I heard the University of Georgia on that list. So did your daughter use the Coalition when she applied? The answer would be no. These schools that take the Coalition usually also have their own application. And my daughter Joy just used the University of Georgia's own application when she applied. We also need to say this, Anika, because I don't want to make it sound like there's only the Common App, right? Do you remember in the chapter I talked about?
Oh, it was like 6 or 7 you called out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
We should bring that to our listeners' attention. So there's the Black Common App. There's the CapEx app. There's the College Greenlight app. There's the UC system. They have their own app. The QuestBridge app, which is for these 40 QuestBridge schools. There's the Universal app. Then you have things like the University of Texas has their own app. Georgia, a lot of states have their own Common App. So I don't want to make it sound like these are the only systems that are out there. These are just the biggest two.
Right.
All right, let's move on.
It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right, Mark, this week's question comes from Miss Hillary in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And she says something funny, but I'm not going to read that.
Why are you cutting out all the good stuff this week?
Well, at first I didn't get it, Hillary. And I was like, oh, that's right. I forgot about the binging. So, okay, let me read it. Sorry,
yes,
y'all.
Please do, because I'm still mad that you wouldn't tell me what popped to your mind about HSI. Haven't recovered.
So she says, hi, Mark and Anika. Your show is so insightful. I've been binging as in listening without stopping, not as in using a late 90s search engine, laugh out loud, for about a week now, and I'm really enjoying it. Thank you, Hillary. Even though it took me a minute. I'm like, wait, Bing? Oh, that's right. That's right. I forgot about that search engine. Okay, so she says, my daughters go to a charter school that has a rigorous set curriculum. For example, they have no electives except for choice of foreign language. All the kids take 4 years of science, 4 years of math, which includes 2 years of calculus, and 4 years of humane letters, which is a seminar course that combines history, literature, and philosophy. The school claims, and I believe them because I've seen it, that these classes are as rigorous as AP or IB, but without the AP or IB label. And the core classes are weighted like AP classes in our students' GPAs. How do we know that the admissions officers will interpret the classes as equivalent to those well-known rigorous classes? Should we use part of the additional info section on the Common App to talk about the school's rigor? And is there anything else we should be doing? Do admissions officers take at face value the info they receive in the high school's profile that comes with the application, or are they skeptical of it?
Okay, so there are a lot of questions in there, but we're going to bang some of them out really quickly. But before we do, I have to offer a major apology to Hillary. So, friends, Nick and I have different roles in the podcast. Like, she's show notes lady, cranks those things out for us. One of my jobs is to field the questions that come in when you guys send questions in. And I don't know how this happened, but I just totally missed Hillary's question. She had a question this, and then she had another question. And I was just scrolling through some of her old emails, Anika, and I found she sent this like months ago. We just missed it. Aww. So in honor of Hillary, I think we have questions from her 2 weeks in a row.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, just to say, sorry, Hillary, we'll double up with you because we blew you off. So sorry, Hillary. Let's look at some of these questions. Some of them can be quick and answered easily, and some of them not so much. So one of them, no, you do not want to go into the additional information and start talking about how amazing your school is. That is not going to be appropriate. It is the responsibility of the school counselor to position the school and the curriculum. That's going to be seen as coming off as desperate and defensive, and it's not a good look. So that's a quick and easy one. I absolutely would not advise that. Our second quick one. Are colleges skeptical about the profile? No, they're going to take the profile at face value. First of all, most college counselors have a lot of personal integrity, so they're not going to lie in the profile. But even for those who don't, they're astute and sagacious enough to know that if you burn these colleges by being unethical and misrepresenting yourself, you'll kill your reputation for the next 10 years. So it would just behoove you to be honest. So yes, colleges will trust their profile. 2, you do not, as the kid, want to go into the additional information session and say, guess what? My class is amazing. It's as good as IB and AP. Please respect me. I mean, I know you wouldn't put it that way, but I'm embellishing a little bit. But I would absolutely not go there. Now, there were a few other questions in there. Do you want to reread like ones I didn't cover, Nika?
Yeah, so she's saying that even though the classes don't have the label, well, I think you answered that if the classes will be interpreted as being
no, that's what I didn't
equivalent
answer.
to those. Oh,
I
you
didn't
didn't
answer that.
Oh.
No, because what I talked about was, will colleges trust the school profile? I said yes. Should you go into additional information? I said no. So the question she's really asking, it's a really, really good question, which is, if you're not coming with the imprimatur of AP or IB, right? And particularly if it's not a really, really well-established school, how can your courses get respect? That's really what she's asking. How can your courses get respect? And this really dovetails nicely with the conversation we had. Anika, was it last week or 2 weeks ago where we talked about how admission officers evaluate a high school? Remember that one? I think it was last week, wasn't it?
It's recent.
Yeah, it was really recent. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they have a lot of tools and ways in which they can do it. So the answer is, if your school is providing a strong curriculum, whether there's AP or IB, for schools that do holistic admissions, they will be able to discern that. So maybe the question really should be, well, how will they know whether or not our curriculum is strong without AP or IB? And I could use my own school. I mean, Westtown School, where I was at, we dropped APs in 2006 or 2007, and we devised our own advanced classes that were more rigorous than AP and never hurt us at all. But I mean, we're an established school, founded in 1799 with, a great track record of placing kids at all of these schools and, $100 million endowment. I mean, it's a little different compared to a newer school, right? So you're asking more about a newer school that wasn't around since 1799. So there's several things. First of all, I'll just go over a lot of things. One, there are students that take AP exams, even that they don't have AP courses, and they do well. Like really strong students can do that. They have good mastery of the material because if the school is rigorous, it's teaching them a lot of it, and some of it they supplement on their own.
Okay.
So schools will still see some AP scores coming in. Secondly, they are going to be looking at your SAT and your ACT scores somewhat as a proxy for the strength of the students at the school. So you still got ACT and SAT. And unfortunately, that will probably have more weight at a school like this than it would at another school. But they will be looking at that. They'll be looking at things like 4-year graduation rate, college placement, where else kids are going. All those things will be looked at. The regional rep or the territory manager will do their on-site visit. And as they do their on-site visit, they'll get a feel for the culture of the school. Remember, these are experts in visiting schools all the time, so they get pretty good at being able to tell a school that's got good rigor and not good rigor. Also, the writing that the kids are producing. That tells a lot about the students and the questions that students ask. So there's just a lot of different ways. And then also, even the curriculum itself. So just because a course doesn't have AP or IB on it, schools that really do holistic admissions can get a description of what's covered in the content of the course, and they can tell a lot by the content of what's covered as well. Notice Hillary said that their own advanced courses are weighted like APs. And what a lot of colleges are going to do is they're going to just trust the weighting that the school uses and accept this as their weighted GPA. So between all of those different ways, you can tell if a school has a very, very rigorous curriculum. And then some schools also do experiential ratings too. We talked about that, where they look at how do kids who have come in from, this school done at our curriculum. What is the grade point average after the freshman year? But go ahead.
Right. So remind us how AP tests are administered, because I assume that it's through the school, but if the school doesn't have an AP program, where are they going to take that AP test?
Yeah, that's a great question. So students can sign up. Yeah. So what happens is the AP, of course, is the College Board test, right? So it's a standardized test. And it's
Mhm.
offered normally in high schools all across the country. But if you're not at a school that offers them, you can sign up, just like homeschool students can sign up. You can go on to the College Board's website, find out your options,
Okay.
and they'll let you know, because homeschool students sign up for AP exams all the time.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Yeah. So I think she had another question in there. Let's make sure we cover them all.
Well, I think the final one was just what else can they be doing?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a great question. I love that one. What else can you do? So one of the things that you can do is you can just really put together a good application. Okay. Really good, like college specific essays, if they have them, really good. You can also make sure your writing is really good. And very, very experienced admissions people can read so much into a student by their writing. So some of the advice would become be a very good writer, do a really thorough and excellent application. And then you really are going to want to focus on the relationship building component of this process. Now, that doesn't
Mhm.
work that well for places like Princeton and MIT, but most schools aren't Princeton and MIT. They're not.
Right.
99%
Right.
of schools, you could reach out to the admissions officer, communicate with them, build rapport with them, and that can really, really go a long way.
Okay.
There's things, of course, that the counseling office needs to do, on that side. Like the counsel, if you ask me this question as a college counselor, I'm going to have a completely different answer what a college counselor can do versus
Mhm.
you ask me what a student can do.
Mhm.
I'm also going to say, you are going to want to be conscious of the fact that your SAT scores are going to carry more weight, especially if this is a newer school that's not that established. You
Mhm.
need to be cognizant of that. And then you probably do want to look at taking some of these tests, some of these, if not AP, there's other things you can take as well. You can take subject tests, you can take CLEP tests, you can take college courses at local
Mhm.
colleges. You can take a lot of online courses from a MOOC, which stands for Massive Open Online Course, like a Coursera. And I would definitely be in email communication with your regional admission counselor. And I would also be applying early action if they offer it. You can do other things to sort of substantiate that you're a strong student.
So, Mark, you're telling Hillary to put together, one of the options is to put together a strong application.
Correct.
And to me, strong is relative.
And a strong testing profile.
And I feel like you can quantify that easier, right?
Right.
So, a strong application are we relying on the counselor to say how strong that application is in her case?
No, because the school's going to discern who has a strong application. Like you could have two people in the same school and one has a stellar application and another has a pathetic, abysmal application. It's up to you as a student to put together a really, really strong application.
What I'm saying is, from a family perspective, how do I know my application is strong? Like, how do I know that it can stand improvements? I'm just trying to find out who's her best source to say, okay, this is good. Like, go ahead and submit it.
I mean, our podcast, and other resources like this, other podcasts that are really good, webinars, and then really good books. Unless you're working with somebody privately to help you, if you're working with a private college coach, or if your school college counselor could be really, really good. I don't know. I don't know how good the school college counselor is here. The school college counselor
Yeah.
could be really good. So, I mean, you just want to take advantage of knowledgeable sources.
And that's why I emphasize that point, because strong is so relative. Like, I might think my stuff is the bomb, but it it may not just be that great. So I just need you to underscore that. Like, who's our checks and balances?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. I'm an advocate of working with professionals and everything. Like I personally, I outsource almost everything that I do now because I'm like, look, if somebody can do it better than me, it can save me time, then I'm going to have them do it. So if you have the resources, if you're not getting it at your school, that's going to be in your best interest if you're working with someone who's competent. But your school may be very, very good. I'm not trying to dissuade you from using your school. I don't know how good the school resources are in this instance. Maybe they're really good. But your point is, it's very difficult for a student or a parent to know what's good and what's not good, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing about the college process, it's a very expensive proposition. It's a lot of money. And not only that, not just money, I mean, it's your future. And so if you're lacking confidence, that stuff as well, it's some of the best investment of resources you'll get to make sure that, that you get that feedback so that you're totally bringing your A game. But once again, you might have very, very good people at your school that are able to do that. So you may not have to expend resources, or you may be one of those people that is so good at being a sponge, and you can listen to every webinar, podcast, workshop, read materials on your own, that you can get there on your own. I mean, some of our listeners do a really good job of that without professional consultation. So, I would argue that majority of people would be well served by having professional consultation. It will pay for itself 10, 20, 100 times over, but it's not something that everybody needs. Did I answer your question, Anika? Because you're trying to ask me the question, how can I know if it's good?
No, you
when
did.
When it's not my area of expertise.
Yep, you hit it.
And basically what I'm saying is that I would recommend that somebody that has some expertise give you that feedback, whether it comes from in your school or outside your school.
Yep.
I think we answered all Hillary's questions.
This week, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get her. We'll get the rest of hers next week, and we will send in a serious apology to her for overlooking her. I really feel bad about that. She was so patient.
Aww.
I sent her apologetic email. Oh, Hillary, I'm so sorry. She was so sweet.
Thank you, Hillary.
Made me want to go to Colorado.
I've been wanting to go there.
My brother lives there.
Does he really? I didn't know that.
Yes, my brother Norm.
I did not know that. I thought he was in
Denver,
Canada.
Colorado.
I thought your family was
No.
Huh.
My brother's been in Denver since 1992.
Oh.
So I have a sister in Canada.
Okay, that's right.
Okay, friends, if you did not hear part 1 of my interview with Peter Van Buskirk, do yourself a favor and go back and listen. But this part 2 is my favorite of all parts of our interview. And we get a lot of responses from our listeners who say that they really like it when we pull back the curtains and share some of the inside secrets of college admissions. Well, Peter is going to do that in this phase of our interview today. He tells 2 extremely compelling and true stories, and he's going to really let you know a lot of behind the scenes things that people don't know when it comes to things like admissions rankings, spring admits, and how waitlists are manipulated. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
I feel like we're almost like we're at a family reunion and we're kind of talking about the drunk uncle. This whole notion of recruiting to reject, it's sort of not talked about in polite society, right? But it's like going on out there. But how often do you hear real conversations other than through people like you with colleges and students about the notion of recruiting to reject? It's just something that the public doesn't oftentimes realize is going on.
Well, let me share with you a story that I think helps to illustrate why these conversations take place on the institutional campus or on campuses. And it goes back to the mid-1980s when the rankings had come out. And I'll never forget this. The staff had assembled. We'd been sort of training ourselves on how to respond because colleges can't be ranked. This stuff will go away, ignore it, all that kind of stuff. So then the U.S. News and World Report comes out, and all of a sudden, we all have copies in front of us, and we're thumbing through the U.S. News and World Report to find a page for our school, Franklin and Marshall College, and we were a national liberal arts college at the time. So there it is. The spread for National Liberal Arts College is 150. We were 27th out of 150. Was that good? Was that bad? Well, we decided it had to be good that we were in the top quartile of the National Liberal Arts Colleges. So the spin began excitedly. And the boss is sitting in the corner reading her own copy, and she said, "Hold on, folks. Now let's just take a look at this list." And I'll never forget her words, and nor her manner as she approached this. She said, "Look at numbers 11, 12, 14, 17, 19, and 21. They are all clearly inferior institutions." And she looked around the room slowly and she said, "How could that happen?" As though it was our fault. Mm-hmm. And she kept looking slowly across the room, and then she said, "What are you going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again?" And it was in that moment that my job description changed. And it changed in literally scores of admission offices around the country when it became no longer good enough to get to class, but we had to move up the pecking order.
Yeah, and I know that's happening with board of trustee level, right?
Board of Trustee and faculty. And what we've done is we fed the beast, and the beast just keeps devouring our desire to be the best. And when I talk with groups now, one of the things that I try to get them to do is eliminate the word top, elite, not word, but words, top, elite, best, with regard to colleges. Now, there isn't a best college. There isn't a top college. Nobody can put that list together for you. You have to make that list for yourself as a student, and you have to do it within the context of what makes sense for you. And that's what's lost in this whole conversation. When we find ourselves talking about the meritocracy, if you will, they admit only 5% that they must be the best. We've stopped talking about the kid, and we've succumbed to the marketing of the college.
Yeah, and let's talk about ways rankings are manipulated. I know you can comment on that. Different gimmicks that have been used, that you've seen used, different colleges even caught manipulating rankings. I mean, it's bad enough that you really can't quantify through some formula what's right for each person, right? I talk about this a lot on the podcast, and I say, why would you outsource your view of beauty to somebody else?
That's a perfect description.
Yeah, that's how I say it. But in addition to that, it's not reliable data that you're looking at either.
No.
Why don't you talk a little bit about different gimmicks you've seen people use to manipulate rankings?
Well, the data is less manipulatable right now than it had been at the outset, but it still is. See, most of the data that's collected by U.S. News and World Report or Princeton Review or Atlantic Monthly, whoever's doing the rankings, it's all collected from the institutions. And it's so self-reported, which means that it's kind of processed before it's sent out. Now, over the last 15 or so years, the common data set has been theoretically the required source of the information. So in other words, institutions are supposed to provide information for the ranking guides that comes from the common data set, which is more purified, if you will. But still, the institution gets to make the call on certain things. Now, for example, I remember when we were looking at the variables that affected the ranking, and one of them was the student-to-professor ratio. Now, at the time, mine was a school of about 1,800 students, and we were pretty comfortable that our student-to-professor ratio was 11-1. It seemed pretty normal, worked well for us. And we began to look around and see that there were schools like us, schools even much larger than us, that were showing student-to-professor ratios of 9-1, 8-1, and it just didn't seem quite right. And and we were really bothered by that. And then we realized maybe we weren't counting correctly. So we, of course, when we attributed an enrollment of 1,800 to the school, we were trying to provide a nice round number that reflected the objective of the institution. But we realized that maybe of those 1,800, there were some students who were studying abroad. There were students doing a Washington semester. There were some students maybe who were on a health leave. So that while they were still kind of on our roll somewhere, they were not active on campus, drawing upon the resources of the college at that time. So when we stripped out the students who were not full-time on campus, we reduced our student body by about 10%. And then we took another look at the faculty, realizing that, yes, we were counting the professors, the associates, the assistant professors. Apparently, we missed a couple of adjuncts and some people who were part-time. Our president at the time had a PhD in French literature, and he taught once in a while. So we just made sure that we included everybody in our faculty count who was qualified to teach, and we increased the size of our faculty by almost 10%. So we were able to manage our student-to-professor ratio in a different way. And the same process applies then to student to endowed resources. Are we counting the students correctly? Are we counting the endowed resources correctly? Just different things like that came into play. And then, of course, selectivity was a factor as well. And this is, you heard through the discussion of the doors of enrollment how colleges can manipulate their selectivity. There are schools that went from admitting 55 to 65% of their applicants to admitting 25 to 30% in a matter of 4 or 5 years, simply by manipulating the way they admitted kids. These are some examples of how the data is managed differently on different campuses. And some schools became very aggressive about the way they manage that information. Now, there's some other sort of dirty little secrets that aren't even known within that revelation. For example, when schools report data to the ranking guides or to their trustees or to the media in any form, they're reporting the data for students who start in September.
Okay? Yeah, talk about
the spring admits and some of these other things that can be used to hide students that might not increase your profile.
You're right on it, Mark. So what happens is that there are schools now that are deciding that some of the students who have applied for admission to start in September are good enough that they could be maybe kept alive in the process. In other words, they're not going to be the straight up admits, and they're probably not quite good enough to make the wait list, but they're good enough to keep alive. Let's offer them admission in January, or let's offer them admission a year hence, guarantee admission a year hence.
Mm-hmm.
And if we get 50 students to accept that offer, they're likely going to be full pay students. They're likely to be students who have some reason to be interested in us. Maybe there's a talent, a family connection, a sport connection, but they're full pay. So we get something by having them enroll, but heaven forbid we have to report their scores or have to report the fact that we admitted them. So if we bring them in January, they go off the grid.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that we report in our September profile for students is the fact that the January kids applied. They don't count as accepted kids. They don't count as enrolled kids. So if we get 50 of those kids, we can reduce then, let's back up to our doors of enrollment, we can reduce by another 200 or so students the number we take in regular decision, which makes us more selective. And the kids we take in January, nobody sees their scores because we don't have to report their scores. Nobody sees that they were admitted because they weren't admitted in September. The same is true of students who are admitted provisionally. You may know of some schools that will say to a student, well, we'll admit you, but you have to come in the summer as a provisional admit to participate in a 6-week program, demonstrate your ability to do the work, and if everything goes well, then you can start in September. Well, the reality is they're doing academic work in June and July that they can carry forth into the start of the fall, which means that they didn't start in September. They started in June or July. So another way that colleges can take kids off the grid. This happens an awful lot with recruited athletes whose scores might not necessarily burnish the academic profile of the institution. So, yeah, colleges have different ways of hiding information that they don't want the public to see.
Or even how they present it. So, you'll see a school that will say, we had 12,000 applications for 1,000 spots, knowing that the public thinks, wow, they're taking 1 out of 12. Well, no, they said they had 12,000 applications, right? It didn't tell you how many they admitted to
That's
get
right.
that.
They might have admitted 5,000 to get 1,000. Yeah.
Right. So that's a gimmick. And lately, there's colleges that present these are SAT averages or ACT averages for our applicants, which is not the same as your matriculants. Obviously, your applications are always going to be higher numbers because, you're going to have harder time competing for the strongest kids in your pool because they're going to have a lot of attractive offers.
Yep, absolutely.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, you are getting multiple recommendations in our recommended resource for episode 91. This is one of our most important recommended resources we've ever done for students. How many times does a student, or let's face it, us parents, need help with organization? If you are me, that would be daily. How many times does a student struggle to get an assignment for school turned in on time or ahead of time? Several of our listeners have sent us emails asking if there's any tool out there that can help a student with organization. So today, we are sharing the best apps out there to help you plan your day and stay on task. Now, there's a guy I follow on YouTube named Thomas Frank, and he breaks it down better than anyone I know. So what he does is he shares the best task management apps. And the recommended resource is his 11-minute video. And we'll put the link in the show notes. Trust me, it's going to be worth your 11 minutes for students and for parents to check out this video. But I can't leave you in suspense like that and just say watch a video. So I'm going to list Thomas Frank's best 3 task management apps here. But please check out the video to see a real detailed breakdown of how these apps compare to each other. The first one is Todoist. The second one is Microsoft To Do, which replaced the Wunderlist app. And the third one is TickTick. Personally, I use Microsoft To Do, and I could not be happier with this app for helping me stay on track. But watch the video where Frank compares all the best features of Todoist, Microsoft To Do, and TickTick, and you decide what is the best for you and what is best for your student.
You and I have talked about one before. It's on the increase. Why don't you talk a little bit about sort of the increased use of wait lists as a way of sort of keeping admission rates down and testing out who's going to come? Why don't you talk about that one first, Peter?
Sure. Well, let's take a look at the waitlist dynamic. Typically, when a college is sending out acceptance letters to an X number of students, they'll send out the same number of waitlist letters to another group of students. That's a lot of waitlist. So in other words, if 2,000 students are being admitted, there might be another 2,000 who get the letter that says, we're pleased to offer you a place on the waitlist, which is very frustrating to students because it sounds very encouraging, but it's simply putting you into our purgatory. You're not in, are you out? That letter, and this is important to note, that letter will say, if you would like to remain active on our waitlist, please do something to signal that intent. So there will be a call to action. Return the enclosed card, write us a letter, give us a call, do something to remain active on the waitlist. And typically a fraction of the students who get that waitlist possibility, a fraction of them will say, yes, keep me active on the waitlist. So let's suppose there are 2,000 students who get the we're pleased to offer you a place on the waitlist letter, and maybe of those 2,000, 25%, and it could be higher, it could be lower, but let's say 25% say, yes, keep me active. So now we have 500 students who are on the active waitlist. Historically, the waitlist has been used as an insurance policy by institutions to cover enrollment gaps. In other words, if we get to the end of our enrollment process and we're coming up short, we'll go to the waitlist. And the way the waitlist has been managed in the past is such that this is, again, some of the dirty little secret stuff, but we'll call. And let's suppose we need 20 students. We'll call until we get 25 to say yes, realizing that the yield on offers of admission from the waitlist is very high. And here's why it's high. If I called the first student and I said, we've got a place for you off the waitlist, would you like to come? And the student says, oh, you know what? I loved your school. I wanted to come, but my parents told me that it was time to send in a deposit somewhere just to make sure that I was covered. And I'm going to honor that commitment. The timing just isn't right. Thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to stay with the school ahead. I call a second student. And this student is really not happy with me at all. The student loved my place, but when we put him on the wait list, that betrayed our loyalty to him. And he has a lot of very colorful language he uses to tell me where I can put that offer of the wait list.
Go pound sand.
The only reason he's on my active wait list is because his mother sent in the card, that kind of thing.
Right.
I get off that call in a hurry. And then I call another student. And this one has been just waiting, hoping and praying that the call would come through. She starts screaming into the phone, I'm in. She texts her friends, I'm in. How many students did I just admit? There will be 3 who will go to school, go out to their friends, tell everybody, I just got off the wait list at such and such college. But there's only 1 who will be counted as admitted because colleges will only count as admitted the students to whom they send letters. And they will only send letters to the students who say yes. So this screening process in the waitlist means that we have a very high yield. It's not unusual to see that the yield on offers of admission for the waitlist will be about 75%. Now, that's not quite as high as early decision, but it's higher than regular decision by a good margin.
Much higher, yeah.
Exactly. So, and to your question, Mark, what a lot of selective schools are doing now is they're saying, why should we be taking so many low-yield regular decision kids? Let's put them on the waitlist. And see if they want to come later. Then we can take them later. So the institutions are using the waitlist intentionally to build their selectivity. And I had proof of this come to me when, and I'm not going to mention the name of the school, but one of my nephews was applying to a school where he was a slam dunk admit. He was top 3% of his class, 31 ACT, 3-sport captain, 16-time legacy, full pay, just a lot of reasons why this wasn't going to be a problem at all.
Yeah.
They put him on the wait list. And by the way, he was a recruited soccer player until he wasn't.
Right. That's a whole other story, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I called the dean of admission on April the 3rd. And I said, can you help us understand what's going on? And he said, Peter, you're right. We knew all about your nephew. Smart kid, talented kid, et cetera, et cetera. And he said two things. He said, we were confused. He didn't apply early decision.
Mm-hmm.
See, in that case, early decision would have signaled, okay, he's going to come. So then the question otherwise is, is he applying simply to get 16 family members off his back, or does he really want to be here?
Right.
And then he said the other thing was very revealing, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, we expect to enroll 65 kids from our wait list this year. Now, keep in mind, this is April the 3rd, before normally any waitlist activity would be even contemplated. He said, we expect to enroll 65. Tell your nephew that if
Hey, Peter, why don't you give people the timeline? Because some people may not know, like May 1st and April 3rd, that may not mean anything to them. So why don't you walk people through the typical timeline? I think it'll help them to understand what you're getting at.
Thank you. Yeah. Typically, the decision letters are sent out, acceptance, waitlist, denial. They're sent out by the middle of March, sometimes the end of March. So basically, by the 1st of April, students have in front of them the full range of options. They've been admitted to certain places, waitlisted at others, and denied at yet others. The month of April, then, is typically given to making the final choice. For many, many, many years, April 1st has been regarded as the candidate reply date. That's the date by which students need to send in their final deposit.
You mean May 1st?
I'm sorry, what did I say? April 1st?
Yeah.
May 1st is the candidate reply date.
Right.
So kids basically have a month to make the final choice. So that's what, to your point, that's why this April 3rd conversation is material.
Yes.
The dean is saying, listen, it's early in the process. If he wants to come, just tell him to stay active on the wait list. He'll be admitted from the wait list, no problem. Now, you don't make that statement unless you know you're going to go to the wait list. And in that case, the waitlist was being used as a strategic enrollment management tool. It was not being used as an insurance policy. And that's a school that's a pretty highly selective school.
Right. So, if it's happening there, it's happening at a whole lot of other places when it's happening at some of the most selectives. And I think the point you're making is, how would they know that early that they would need to go to the wait list unless it was strategy? Because typically you'd wait until national candidate reply date comes in, see who comes in. You may be at your full enrollment capacity. You may not need a wait list if you truly are using a wait list the way it's been used in the past historically.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, what's happening with some schools these days is that they're playing that game a little bit too tightly, and it's in some instances coming back to bite them in that they've reduced the size of their regular decision admit group too much.
So that they're missing diamonds in the rough, or is that the point you're making?
Exactly. And the yield on their wait list is not working out the way they had anticipated either. So it's a risky move. But for many years, it has been a successful tool that schools have been using.
Next week, we have more breaking news. The ACT change will allow students to retake individual sections. And we'll be in chapter 92 of 171 answers. And we're talking about the college admission secrets that the media is not telling you. And next week's question is from a mom who wants to know if her daughter's strategy of inviting admissions counselors to visit her relatively new high school is a good one. And Mark continues his interview with Mr. Peter Van Buskirk and understanding how colleges act as businesses in ways that are not in your best interests, part 3.
Okay, friends, our college spotlight today is one of the big boys on the block. So the last few weeks, we've been focusing on some underrated gems, but we're trying to mix it up a little bit. Great meeting this week with Massachusetts Institute of Technology, world-renowned for brilliant scientists and researchers and entrepreneurs. Right in Boston, 4,600 undergraduates. I mean, everybody, when I say MIT, Nika, what do you think?
High caliber.
Yeah.
That's all I can say right now.
I mean, some of the smartest people in the world, right? Honestly.
Right.
It is not a school for what we used to call the plugger. Like, this is a school for people who are gifted. This is. And it's a school. And one of the reasons why they have to be gifted at MIT, and they need to be gifted in math and science, no matter what their major is because, MIT has some core requirements that they refer to as GIRs. And GIRs is just an acronym for General Institute Requirements. And these are 2 courses, 2 math courses, 2 physics courses, 2 bio courses, 2 chem courses that are required no matter what your major is. Okay, and even think, well, what's the big deal? Well, when you're in there with geniuses, and you're in there with geniuses. I mean, my view on rankings, Anika. You know how I think they're completely overrated because it's all about match and fit. But I also know people use them. And I've said before, around the world, the QS rankings are the number one rankings. Those are the world rankings. And MIT is ranked as the number one institution in the world, according to the QS world rankings. And what that's going to mean, whether I think they're bogus or not, and what I think is bogus is just, it doesn't mean it's not a good school. I don't say that. It just doesn't mean it's for you because it's ranked higher, right? I didn't dispute it's good. But what that means is it's going to be a very, 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 very high-powered student body. Now, what if you're not ready for these classes? Because you got to take these classes, and they're not a joke. They do offer some discovery classes that can help you transition. One thing I love about MIT is because they're so intense with these brilliant geniuses. The professors are Nobel Prize winners. The students are like, everybody I've ever worked with that's gone to MIT, like, in fact, I have a student right now. It's at MIT in the freshman class that I work with. She loves it, but everybody will say the people around you are like the smartest people you've ever met in your life. They're incredible, and they know the place is intense. So one of the things that they do that I love, they started this, I don't know, it's less than 10 years ago now. You come in as a freshman there, Anika, and you take your courses, what they call pass, no record basis. Pass, no record basis. And what that means is that if you get an A, a B, or a C, then on your transcript, it's just going to say pass. Okay? Anything else, no record, means an F doesn't even go on your record. Now, you'd have to repeat the class, but this is so that you can transition to the level of rigor they have there. And they don't only do this for the first semester, they do it for the second semester as well, which is really, really, really amazing. Now, of course, MIT is known, for its incredible STEM, right? It's known for being unbelievable for computer science, and it's known as being unbelievable for all aspects of engineering. But a lot of people don't realize that MIT is also amazing in business. Sloan School of Business, really, really, really strong. And then languages are strong, and music and art and economics, biology, political science, and architecture. They've got some fantastic strength in areas outside of just STEM. And that's one thing that's probably the most misunderstood thing about MIT. Another thing I think that's misunderstood about MIT, now this has to do more with what they look for in the admission process, but they really focus on a certain kind of community that they're trying to have there. And they have multiple questions in their application that are designed to get at this. And they really want to know that you're nice, that you're kind, that you're going to be a good community member, that you're going to contribute to the community, that you're going to look out for your neighbor. They're full of 800 perfect test score kids, right? Who invented this and did high-level national research. Their application is just complete with that type of kid. But they're looking for so much more than that in terms of who they actually look for. Close-knit community, resources of a much, much, much larger school. And they also want to know, what do you do for fun? They want to know that you have an escape, because if you don't, you might crack with the pressure. So do you know how to laugh? Do you know how to have fun? Are you comfortable in your own skin? Those intangible things weigh very, very, very heavily into who they admit and who they don't admit. They want to know that you have an outlet. When it comes to their admission process, they're very, very, very explicit about certain things that you have. You have to have 2 recommendations, and one has to come from a STEM and one has to come from humanities or social sciences. Most schools don't dictate to you, we want 2, and here's who we have, who we want it to come from, right? That's not normal, but they're very deliberate about that. They're also deliberate about the fact that they're one of 4 schools in the country that they demand that subject test. Not only do they need those subject tests, they need 2 of them, and one has to be in science and one has to be either Math 1 or Math 2, and they will not budge on that. And I've had 2 conversations with 2 of their admissions officers within the last 3 weeks, because I have someone who I think would be amazing for them this year. And she has all the scores and all the stuff that they want, but she doesn't want to take another subject test. And they're like, sorry, Mark, she's incomplete.
It's funny. I asked the question and before I even got out. I say, nope, not happening. Done. It's not up for discussion. Their research indicates if you're not scoring really high 700s, I mean, they can look at mid 700s, but if you're not scoring there, then you're going to struggle in their curriculum. And it doesn't mean there are a few exceptions. Yeah, but there are not very many exceptions. I mean, that they just have a lot of track record of showing that. But this is if you love to do research, if you love to do entrepreneurship, this place can be great. And all the major companies that you think of, Anika, they have located right by MIT to tap into MIT's talent.
I bet.
They've located right there. Of course, they're right in the Kendall Square section of Cambridge. So they're a biotech hub. So Microsoft moved there. Google moved right there, right across from campus just to tap into their talent. No, they did. Amazon is there. And then if you're into the medical field, they have some of the best hospitals in the country. I mean, one of the things that's great is they have fully funded summer research internships in Spain and Germany and 30 countries. They have all of that. They also have a great partnership with Wellesley and Harvard. So you can take classes at Wellesley and you can take classes at Harvard because, they're all right there. It's really cool. To try to diminish stress, they have no classes between 5 to 7. They want you to join a dance club, join a chess club. So they do these different things to try to diffuse their intensity, but this place is still an intense place. This is a place where you're around some of the brightest brainiacs that you will see when it comes to STEM and just all aspects of STEM. A lot of times I'll work with kids and they'll be like, I got perfect on my test scores or almost got perfect. I'm applying to MIT. Well, everybody's almost got that profile. That doesn't mean anything. I mean, the whole school is full of kids like that with a few exceptions. And so you need to be very, very, very self-confident. I remember one student I worked, this was when I first started doing this, and MIT just was not right for him. He went in, he was top of his class, and he went in there and he came out and he was not confident at all. So you need to not only be wicked smart and hardworking, collaborative, get along with people, but you need to have a certain amount of self-confidence. There's a lot more that I could say. Any questions about anything, Anika? Anything I said so far that caught your attention? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm always fascinated by those intense environments like that and how they really want to tap into the humane side of people. Because when you think of intensity, you associate that with just rigidness. Like you just don't think of them being people that are nice and kind and actually want to give back to the community. So to your point about the kids that, I've got the scores, I've got this, but that's not enough. So is it just that humane side of it? Or what is the other? Because I don't really get the other distinction that makes those kids who do have all the numbers that those other kids have. What does set them apart? Like, what do you do beyond that?
Well, there's a lot of things. So interviews are important at MIT. They love interviews. So they're looking, they get to see your softer side there. They're looking at the essays. They're looking at everything. They're looking at those recommendations really closely for certain character traits. Every aspect, how you write and what you say and how you write. All of that matters in their process. When you think of MIT, you think of research. You think of hands-on experimentation. I mean, their Brain and Cognitive Science Center is the world's largest neuroscience center. And if you want to be a geneticist, MIT is as fine a place as you will find in the world. But in addition to this, there are 8 courses that are required in their GIR requirements. They also have 8 courses in what are known as their Haas requirements. And Haas is just simply an acronym for Humanities, H, Arts, A, S, Social, Sciences, the other S. And 2 of these subjects must be designated as communication intensive courses in order to fulfill their communication requirement. So these are extremely important courses at MIT. And the reason they're so important is because MIT is not only developing geniuses, but they want geniuses with humane instincts. And they take that very, very seriously. And they deepen their knowledge of a variety of different cultural and disciplinary areas. Now, there's some other peculiarities about their process I do need to bring up. They are not on the Common App or the Coalition, so you got to do MIT's own application. Okay? You got to do a whole separate application for MIT that they have created their questions that tell them whether you're a match for them. So you got to be committed to them to do a whole, remember I said about the Coalition? You're going to do a whole separate application for MIT. You're going to have to do that. That's just part of their process. I've already mentioned the separate subject tests and the separate recommendations that you have to get. They're going to be
expecting, of course, for you to max out the curriculum and have that level of rigor. I mean, I think that goes without being said. They don't require BC Calc like Caltech, but most of their kids are coming in. And even that they still take Math 1 or Math 2, either one. I talked to them about this. Overwhelmingly, people are going to be coming with Math 2 over Math 1 as far as the subject test that they're going to take. Because Math 2's got more advanced topics in it than Math 1. It's the higher level math test, right? This is going to be the one they're going to take. Residential life is pretty cool. It's close-knit. All 10 dorms are freshmen through seniors, so they try to create that community. And they've got some really cool dorms. They've got like some with movie theaters in them and different cultures in them. And 90% of students live on campus. Yeah, and by the way, they have the largest D3 sports program in the country. So you don't think of MIT in sports. They don't always win a lot, but they have a lot of different teams. Now, in fairness, a lot of the popular sports at MIT are the more obscure ones that we've discussed before, like crew, like sailing, like water polo. But hockey, swimming, diving, and cross country have also been prominent. Yeah, and so, those are just some of the things that I wanted to highlight. But if there's one thing I like to highlight more than anything is that they're really trying hard to have that work-life balance and have that healthy culture and diminish some of the stress and take some of the edge of their intensity off.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. And if you found this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that could really use this information. Your College Bound Kid is produced by John Lockenbaugh. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Artwork is by Andrea Togo. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. If you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340.
And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like for us to answer on the show, please email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. That's questions with an S at yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions, so send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, which is just simply yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.